Hi, everybody. So I did my LCA on Chipotle burrito bowls. So specifically the bowl that the food is holding in that picture. And I couldn't find specific sales data. So I'm very sorry, but I will do the best I can. So kind of an overview of this presentation, I'm going to kind of walk you through the life cycle stages of molded fiber itself. And we're going to talk about the environmental impacts and then get into use, disposal, transportation, all of that. So let's start with raw materials. So Chipotle essentially describes their bowls as being made from compostable plant-based fibers. So to me, that's very vague. And then they follow it up with an even more vague statement saying that they are zero waste because they are compostable and made from recycled materials. And to me, that's a pretty big claim to make nowadays. And as we know, sometimes it's not true. So I wanted to kind of see if that was right. So essentially, molded fiber, which is what Chipotle bowls are made out of, is water and wood fibers molded into a specific shape. And it's used primarily for food carriers such as plates and bowls. So this is a little video I found detailing how egg cartons are made from molded fiber. So if you want to kind of dive more into it, you can look at that at your leisure. But kind of an overview, the raw material process essentially goes like this. So the cellulose fibers are blended together and with water in a blend tank and forms an aggregate pulp. And so pulp can be used for many different things, such as paper, but in this specific case, it's going to be molded into a shape. So sometimes for the cellulose, recovered paper is used, but this is kind of limited by the ease and the cost of collection. The number of times it can be reused is also limited, so it can be reused up to 5 to 7 times, which, is reusable, but to an extent, right? So it's not a completely renewable resource. Also, sometimes virgin fibers are used instead of recovered paper for precision molded items, so not every single piece of cellulose in the blend tank is going to be recovered paper. So essentially this pulp is then mixed in a slurry of water, molded into a specific shape, and then dried. So this drying process is really very energy intensive. So if you've ever tried to boil water, you know how hard it is to get water to evaporate. We've learned about it in class. So essentially this is extremely energy intensive to dry these things out. And also, if you want to turn this molded fiber into a food storage container, you have to go through a second step, which is called waterproofing or a secondary treatment. So it's required by the FDA when dealing with food products and beverages. And essentially, it is mixing colloidal rosin and wax emulsion along with fluorocarbon chemicals to fight greasy liquids. So you guys have probably heard of or maybe seen on Facebook that in 2019, Chipotle had cancer-causing materials in their bowls. And this is essentially what the articles were referencing are these fluorochemicals or PFAs, which are derived from petrochemicals and do not biodegrade. So in this paper that I found that really detailed the process of creating molded fiber, they talked about some attempts to make a biodegradative alternative to these PFA chemicals, but they haven't really found a suitable replacement yet. So the environmental impacts of this process. So essentially, as I stated before, the most energy intensive part is the drying of materials. The specific impact of this energy usage depends on the heat source itself. So steam has lower environmental impact than heated air ovens because it doesn't have as much, take as much energy to dry them. Also, the quality of the fibers is affected negatively every time they are recycled, so there's limited reusability. Also, other LCA studies that have studied the packaging itself, like the polymer, show that like deforestation to create these products isn't really the biggest contributor to environmental impact. It's really the pulp and paper production stages that have the most negative environmental impact of the manufacturing process. So let's get into packaging, transport, and use. So this is kind of where it gets kind of hazy because I couldn't find specific data for this. So I kind of had to make some intuitive leaps, if you will. But essentially, what I could find was in 2018, Chipotle modified the shape of their compostable burrito bowl to double the amount of bowls that could fit into a single case. In their sustainability report, they mentioned that some of their packaging was manufactured and processed in North America, but the bowls' origins themselves were not listed. So, if we're working on the assumption that the bowls are manufactured in North America, the emissions totals for Chipotle in 2018 would be applicable. So, approximately 4,267 tons of carbon dioxide in a year, which is a lot. So also, I couldn't find specific sales data or any use data. So I had to create my own Google survey that um, asked GMU students, which was kind of a convenience bias towards my classmates in 302, kind of how often they got burrito bowls and where they disposed of them. So basically, from the results of my survey, in a 14-week semester, 501 burrito bowls are consumed. And this is an average of 6.34 bowls per person per semester. So obviously, there's convenience bias and sample size bias since I only had sample size of 79 people, but I had to work with kind of what I have. So there's still a lot of burrito bowls, and I'm sure that's not even a fraction of the true number from our GMU store's sales. So obviously, this product is single use. So where does it go after it's disposed of? There are multiple different options. So this can be recycled into other paper products, but it has to be collected and processed. Potentially, it would almost be easier to incinerate the product since it's such an energy intensive process to make it. You could get some of the energy back by creating it through incineration, but that may not be the best option. Also, the bowl can be composted through biodegradation, but it depends on the additives that you use for waterproofing. So, since most of these chemicals do not biodegrade, they are not compostable, essentially, the ones that Chipotle is using. And also, Chipotle kind of says that they have a lot of composting going on, but in actuality, 460 of their nationwide stores, or 18%, had a composting program in place in 2018. So a lot of these bowls aren't getting composted on a nationwide scale. So another option is landfilling. So the bowl can be put into a landfill. It will degrade anaerobically, as we have seen on our field trip, and cause methane emissions to increase global warming. Also, Chipotle kind of assumes that a lot of people are going to be putting their bowls into the correct composting bin when they dispose of them, but not everyone is paying attention, and I'm sure a lot more bowls end up in the landfill than Chipotle would be comfortable admitting to. So there's also that to keep in mind. And the last option would be incineration. So obviously we all know that on the GMU campus, all trash is incinerated to form energy. So in 2019, 6.9 million pounds of solid waste was generated at the Fairfax campus. Chipotle currently is not composting on campus. And from my Google Form survey, almost 80% of the responses I got that consumed a burrito bowl discard their waste on campus. This is essentially almost 400 bowls of the original 501 that are being added to the incinerator. So this is also kind of an interesting way that Chipotle is not accounting for in their data. So obviously, I kind of looked at this project as a way to see if the alternatives that we are creating for single-use plastic and these molded fiber bowls and compostable flatware is really a viable alternative. And obviously, if we've seen it's not a perfect solution, so these are some improvements to that. So adding bamboo into the pulping process. So bamboo is fast growing and is considered a rapidly renewable resource. It doesn't require pesticides. It uses very little water. And since it's so fast growing, it pulls carbon dioxide out of the air faster than other plants. Also, changing the drying energy source to steam instead of heated air, which is more energy efficient, and making sure no virgin pulp is used in the manufacturing process would be worthwhile improvements to make for manufacturing. Also, just like a personal anecdote, so I studied abroad in South Korea last spring, and the interesting thing was, as you went to a restaurant or a coffee shop, if you ordered something, you'd have to tell them if you were dining in or out. And if you were dining in, they had to give you a reusable um, like packaging for your food, so like a glass cup or something for your drink, and you'd have to give it back for them to wash. And I think this would be a very good practice for us to implement nationally. Obviously, coronavirus needs to calm down, but it could also really cut down on single use bowls that are intended for dine in customers that really don't need them. Also, changing the current waterproofing additives to biodegradable alternatives so the bowls will truly be compostable so they don't have these petrochemicals in them. For the on campus store, joining the compost effort with Blaze Pizza and the coffee shops on campus to create compost for the food forest would be very beneficial. Also, for Chipotle nationwide to increase their composting options at off campus stores, which is in their sustainability report, but they could really amp it up. So, I always like to end on a quote. So, obviously, single use is kind of a problem of our age, and are we doing an adequate job to solve it with these more like renewable alternatives? Is really kind of the question. And I think we all, as a class, understand that, but I think it's really interesting to discuss and look into these new wave products for this solution. But anyway, these are my references, and these are who I contacted and did not receive any information from, just so you know that I tried. Anyway, so if you guys have any questions, please let me know on the discussion board, and I hope everyone is hanging in there and feeling great.